Welcome. This is presentation number 16 in our series, Rereading the Fourth Gospel, the story of Jesus the Revealer. And we have reached a critical point in the story today, the death of the Revealer. Now, I have another title for this topic, but I didn't dare to put it up because my other title for it is Ambushed by Abundance, a meaning of the death of the Revealer that will be extremely counterintuitive. So let's go with this title that is purely descriptive and doesn't do meaning, the death of the Revealer. Here is a text that will focus our topic today, and I will just read it first and then we will return to it later. But this is the text that in some ways marks the ambush of the ending, the surprise of the ending. And this is Jerusalem today where this happened. It is at sunset, the end of the day, and we read now just the text to get it in our mind, to start it working in our mind. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water came out. That's the text we like to get our handle on and to reset this. We also want to say that there is a symphonic quality, a musical quality to the fourth gospel. There is a musical quality to many books in the Bible. No book more so maybe than the book of Revelation, the last book of the Bible. But there is a kind of musical tenor in the Gospel of John too. And the music has a certain mood. And I just wonder if we could say a word or two about the mood. So here at the wedding, it's pretty happy. It's a festive occasion. So that's there. And then we have the well, where there is living water and all kinds of good things happening. And then there is healing by the pool of the man who has been paralyzed for 38 years. And then there is the raising of Lazarus, that after he has been decomposing. So from these things, wedding, well, pool, and Lazarus' tomb, we have now arrived at the cross. And the question is, to what extent is there a change of mood? Because the mood is pretty good all along here, even the grave of Lazarus, because Jesus raises him from the dead. So what's the mood of the music in this gospel? And I thought I could try out a sample here. This is Chopin's Funeral March. And I just want to ask if this could be the mood as we move forward, or whether this amazing piece of music that I love very much, whether this doesn't quite do it. Let's just listen for a few seconds. we will mute Chopin and move on. But could you hear it? You could hear that that is music in minor key, that it is funeral music. It is called the Funeral March. It's one of the best known pieces in music today, and as I said, I like it. I just wonder if it works for our topic. That's my question. Whether we should, as we are moving to someone's death and someone's funeral, that we should use funeral music. We'll get back to it later. I have asked a couple of questions. We're reading now from the time that Jesus has been crucified, where we left off in our previous presentation, and we're beginning now in John 19:23. When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. So here we are in one depiction, one late or 14th century, 14th century depiction here, with a scene of the crucifixion, and here with the soldiers dividing the clothes. And here I have enlarged that a little, and we will read our text. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who will get it." This was to fulfill what the scripture says. They divided my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots. And that is what the soldiers did. It's very matter of fact, the reporting here. Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Clopas, and Mary Magdalene. 3 Marys. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." And then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home. So Jesus here in the moment of departure and moment of agony, he talks. He is talking from the cross. And this is El Greco's depiction, and he has let us see the beloved disciple more prominent, and this must be Mary, the mother. And so there is an exchange about those two going on, Jesus speaking, and in some ways making sure that someone takes care of the mother. I will be going, but the beloved disciple will take care of her. So this shows the ability of Jesus to stay attuned to other people's needs, even in that situation. After this, when Jesus knew that all was now completed, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, "I thirst." A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. So here, for our inability to do a pictorial representation of his thirst, I just show this picture. And we read on to a very big verse. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is completed." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. And the word in Greek, Tetelstai, it's just one word. Just one word, and here that's how it looks in Greek. Tetelstai. It's a verb in the perfect tense. And the perfect tense in Greek is not just a description of something that has been completed. It is a description of the action all the way through to the point of completion. So you are not just seeing the end result, but you are seeing everything that happened before the end result. It's a different sense of the verb. And Greek is a marvelous language for the way it does specificity. So this is our word. And in this sense of completion, the Tetelstai here, we hear some echoes. We hear echoes from within the Gospel of John itself. We hear Jesus saying to the disciples when they come and they are very surprised that he is talking to the woman of Samaria. Then he tells them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to complete his work. And then in John 17, in a praying session, I glorified you on earth by completing the work that you gave me to do. And then here in 1928, after this, when Jesus now knew that all was now completed. So here is John keeping us abreast on Jesus' goal of bringing something to completion. There is also a soft echo of Isaiah. He will not lose heart or be broken until he has established justice in the earth. He will not give up until he has brought it to completion. That's the point in Isaiah. And then there is an echo of Genesis here, clearly, because the word for bringing something to completion in John is the same word that the Greek translation of Genesis will use in the creation story in Genesis. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed. Syn et telestisam. It's the same word, a little bit fortified. And all their multitude. And on the seventh day God completed synatelesen, the word that he had done. And he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. So we hear echoes in John from Genesis. And the person who is doing this, looking at this text in John, when Jesus cries out Tetelstai, we have to, where are we? Who is he? Well, John will tell us in the beginning was the revealer, and the revealer was with God, and the revealer was God. And he will say that the revealer is the creator of all things. That's what he will say. And then he says in connection with his 2 Sabbath healings, and that's important. My Father is working until now, and I am also working. We must work the work of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. The work will end at some point, but it will not end before it has been brought to completion. Then it will end. And so we have then another sort of constellation, or that we need to put verses together. So on the seventh day, God completed the work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all the work that he had done. And Jesus received the wine. He said, it is completed. And it's time to rest. It's brought to completion. And the echo of the Friday of the creation story in Genesis is now louder in the Gospel of John, when God's work, the revealer's work, has been brought to completion. And at sundown, what exquisite timing, at sundown on that day, he will rest. It is quite amazing. Now, just to make sure we have some scholarly support, if not for that specific point, at least for the idea of completion. And this is Jörg Frey, who is one of the contemporary scholars of John and one of the leading ones. He is in Switzerland. Thus, he says, the death scene is characterized 3 times as completion within a very tight space. Everything that was to come to completion through Jesus, in accordance with Scripture and with the will of the Father who sent him, is completed here. The work that has been entrusted to him is completed in his death. This is counterintuitive. It should be completed on Sunday morning at the resurrection. He should say then, Tetelstai, it is completed. But he says that at his death. And that is strange and in some ways surprising, and something that makes it necessary to explore meanings. We'll return to it, but we now must read on. Since it was the day of preparation, the Jews did not want the bodies left on the cross during the Sabbath, especially because that Sabbath was a day of great solemnity. So they asked Pilate to have the legs of the crucified men broken and the bodies removed. So what does that mean? It means that death by crucifixion is a protracted death. It doesn't happen fast. And how does it happen? So they will break the legs, and here these are actually illustrations from an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association, the JAMA, a medical journal that looked at crucifixion and the death of Jesus some years ago, some decades ago. When it was published, it was very controversial, because many said that's not a suitable topic for a medical journal. So the short version of this illustration is that when you are crucified, it's hard to breathe. Breathing in is not so hard, because you can do that passively with the body hanging. But breathing out is very hard. It's very difficult to exhale. So then you have to lift. The crucified person has to lift his body to breathe out, to exhale. And so how do you die? Well, you can have injuries before you die, as Jesus did have, because he had been tortured and flogged before. But in a usual death by crucifixion, it is protracted. And when they break the legs, it is not so as to make you die from the broken legs, but to make it harder to exhale. You will die by asphyxiation. You will die by not being able to breathe out anymore. And so that is how they hasten it. But Jesus has died already. It is a surprise to them that he died so soon. What's wrong with him? That his death is so quick. So let's just look at a couple of perspectives now, what I call memories at the crucifixion. And here I use this absolutely priceless painting by Rembrandt that is now in the Alte Pinakothek in this German city of Munich. This is the raising of the cross of Jesus. And guess who is that? Who is that in the foot of the cross? Participating at the raising of the cross, and you see how Rembrandt illuminates characters. Who is that? With that somewhat pensive, somewhat worried expression. Is he a participant, approving of it, or is he a mourner, sort of in somewhat disapproving? Well, anyway, it is Rembrandt. He painted himself in there so as to say that event many years ago is relevant to me today. I am also in some ways a participant. Now for the perspectives. They took his clothes. Stupendous callousness toward a compassionate and caring person. Just total detachment from who he is and what he suffers. And then he says, I thirst. It's one word in Greek, dipso. And we look back in the gospel. Remember the wine at the wedding. Here they serve him sour wine. But the wine at the wedding was very good quality. So the sort of dissonance of these things is enormous. Remember the well at Samaria. I have water that can relieve your thirst. And remember the feeding of the 5,000. If you eat this bread, drink the water, you won't be thirsty or hunger again. And here on the last day, great day of the feast, if anyone is thirsty, let him come to me and drink. And now from the cross, I am thirsty. And thirsty with a double meaning, as we have learned, as we have walked through this gospel. And then this one, that Sabbath day. That Sabbath was a day of great solemnity. So religiously observant people, intending to be faithful to the divine command, they will hasten sort of the taking down of Jesus from the cross so as to preserve the sacredness of the day. They are, and I could say this in much better ways, but they are fixated on the commandment, and they are totally oblivious to the divine commitment that Jesus has brought to completion right there, right on that Friday afternoon before the Sabbath. It was indeed a day of great solemnity, much greater than they could imagine this particular Sabbath, and for reasons not seen by them. And then to our ambush. So then the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who had been crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water came out. He who saw this has testified, so that you also may believe. His testimony is true, and he knows that he tells the truth. So here we are again just watching things from the outside, looking at the facts of this, and ascertaining that Jesus is really dead. And then we will look for some meanings. I will just do one quick one, and then we will look for a bigger, higher level of meanings. So Jesus died sooner than expected. It is a life given, not a life taken. That's explicit in the gospel. I lay down my life. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. It's a life given. And then he bowed his head and handed over his spirit, as though, again, it's a life given. That's the body language of that. And this brings us to a feature that I just like to review quickly. John seems to be telling us a story that has a script. And if we were to call the script something, I will call it the script of abundance. That we are looking in a story that has a script of abundance. Here we are at the wedding, and we see the stone water jars, and they are very big, 20 or 30 gallons, and there are 6 of them, and they will be filled. They will have water turned into wine, and you will not disagree with me that there is a sense of abundance to this scene. And then we go to the feeding of the 5,000, and we see the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and we see, we read at the end that they gathered them up, and from the fragments of the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten, they filled 12 baskets. So here we have again, you will not disagree with me, abundance. This is then something happens according to a script of abundance. And then we have a party after the raising of Lazarus here in John chapter 12. And we have Mary who arrives there with a pound of costly perfume made of pure nard. She anointed Jesus' feet and wiped them with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume. Everything is nice, attractive, sensory-wise, smell and ambience, and everything is great. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, the one who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this perfume not sold for 300 denarii and the money given to the poor?" Never mind. It's again another element in a script of abundance where Mary will anoint Jesus' feet with this ointment. She is also participating in that script. Jesus works out his script of abundance with other participants too with him. Here there is this is the descent from the cross, and this is again Rembrandt's depiction of the descent from the cross. This one is also in Munich. And who is that? Helping Jesus get down from the cross, or the dead body of Jesus get down from the cross. It's Rembrandt. It's there too. It is amazing sort of identification with the story. So now we are a little bit ahead in chapter 19, after Jesus has died. After these things, Joseph of Arimathea, who was a disciple of Jesus, though a secret one because of his fear of the Jews, asked Pilate to let him take away the body of Jesus. Pilate gave him permission, so he came and removed his body. So here too, whether they know it or not, they will participate in this script of abundance. So Nicodemus, who had first come to Jesus by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, weighing about 100 pounds. You need a wheelbarrow for that. You need a lot of, how do you transport that? They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices in linen cloths, according to the burial customs of the Jews. And our artists are doing a pretty good job of depicting the sadness, the horror of this. But some from this altarpiece or from a stained glass window in a church in Israel, in Gamla, there is Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus, and sacks full of this ointment that they bring here. So we are looking at abundance in the script. We have one more example, and this is on the lake after the resurrection of Jesus in the last chapter in the Gospel of John. And there in the morning hours, Simon Peter said to them, "I'm going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." Well, this is the night before. They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know it was Jesus. So he said to them, they didn't catch anything, so he says to them before they recognize him, "Cast a net to the right side of the boat and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. So Simon Peter, a little while later, went aboard and hauled the net ashore, full of large fish, not small fish, large fish, 153 of them, and a strange number, a precise number. That must have been the number. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. And guess what? Script of abundance. The whole thing is a script of abundance, and many participants. Yes, Jesus is the ultimate giver of abundance, but there are other participants to make this work and to make this symmetric. And now we can read again the bigger ambush at dusk here in the Gospel of John and its meaning. I'll comment on the meaning in a second. Let's just read it again. The soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who had been crucified with him. But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water came out. You could read this in a purely forensic sense and say, he's really dead. You know, that's what a pathologist, a forensic pathologist would do and say, well, he's really dead. But you need to read it with theological eyeglasses. Blood and water, understood theologically, in the context of the Gospel of John, because that's where we are. And so let's suggest some theological meanings. I'll begin with Joanne Brandt in her John commentary. John makes it possible to gaze upon Jesus' body, upon the cross, without feeling his humiliation or needing to look away. Just look. Normally, looking at someone who is crucified would be a really unpleasant experience. She wants to tell you, she wants to tell us that one should look at this crucified person without feeling that you need to look away. It's a good point. And then from Gail O'Day, that I have quoted before, and this one we have quoted earlier, the language of love is a different ethical language from the language of discipleship found in the Synoptic Gospels. It is language of fullness rather than language of emptying. One will give one's life for one's friends as an act of love. In John, one gives out of the abundance of one's love, not out of the denial of oneself. So the blood and water that comes out, and the language itself has been primed in the Gospel of John, is a language of gift and just a different sense of it. So I'm going to read a statement that I have elaborated slightly. I have embellished it slightly from my own book, A God of Sense and Traditions of Nonsense here. So there has been no change in the economy of abundance from the beginning of the Bible story, because God's story is from the beginning a God who gives abundantly. And there has been no change in that story, except for the fact that no one had known its actual measure, how big it was. They had rarely thought of it in terms of 6 stone jars of the finest wine, or of a pound of costly perfume. No. Oh, no. Or of 12 baskets of leftovers. I'm sorry. Or of 12 baskets of leftovers. I know that I'm hiding the text here, but I think you get the idea. Or of a mixture of myrrh and aloes, or of a pound of costly perfume. Yes, that's Mary, and you see her with her costly perfume. Or, let me see if I get this right, or of a mixture of myrrh and aloes weighing about 100 pounds. And they had never thought of it in terms of blood and water. We go from images of abundance to an image of greater abundance. The blood and water that comes out from the side, that kind of gift. That is a strange thing. Here is my book, and here is another quotation. Pianissimo at the wedding, fortissimo at the cross. The cross is not a contrast to Jesus' first sign at the wedding. Remember that we talked about the music? Is it Chopin's funeral march? Or is it some other music that has yet to be written? Nobody has composed that music yet. The cross is not a contrast to Jesus' first sign at the wedding, but its continuation and climax. At the wedding, Jesus plays softly in pianissimo the melody that will be played fortissimo at the cross. Strange though it seems, and contrary to ingrained readings, the cross is not a melody played in minor key like Chopin's funeral march, in a state of disconsolate grief. The cross in John is a melody played in major key, as triumph and the antidote to grief. These things occurred so that the scripture might be fulfilled. None of his bones shall be broken. And here is the background text for that in Exodus. And again, another passage of scripture says, they will look at the one whom they have pierced. That is a quotation from Zechariah. And the text in Zechariah, when people look upon him whom they have pierced, it changes the way they think about God. It changes a relationship from alienation to reconciliation. That's what I say, what Zechariah's background text does. And that is what John does too here when he says, when I am lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself. So this is coherent through and through. And this is Fra Angelico in Florence, who is one of our favorite painting. And we are looking at meanings here, and there is meaning on every corner. And here then we have here the end of Concealment. I've read this already. Joseph of Arimathea, who was a secret disciple of Jesus, he comes out from the closet to declare himself. It's the end of Concealment. He asks Pilate if he could have permission to take away the body of Jesus, and he gets permission. So he came and removed his body. And Nicodemus, who was there way back, who came to Jesus one evening, he also came. And he is the one who brings this abundance of ointment. They took the body of Jesus and wrapped it with the spices and linen cloths according to the burial customs of the Jews. Now there was a garden in the place where he was crucified, and in the garden there was a new tomb in which no one had ever been laid. So they will here, and Joseph of Arimathea or Nicodemus or the other way around are here, and we see that it is a scene of grief in the story, but not as to meaning in the Gospel of John. There is a kind of discrepancy there. And so, because it was the Jewish day of preparation and the tomb was nearby, they laid Jesus there. And that's the end of the story of the death and burial of Jesus in the Gospel of John. Let's do a review. The death of Jesus is a life given, not a life taken. The hour that was made known at the wedding comes to completion at the cross in the proclamation. It is completed. The cross is the zenith, the highest peak in John's script of abundance. Blood and water are tokens of gift, life and healing. Does it need to be said? Let us say it. John's story refutes the lie every step of the way until it is silenced for good by blood and water at the cross. It is completed, followed by rest. Echoes the story of God's rest, God's Sabbath rest at creation. Mary is present at the wedding, and at the cross a participant in and a recipient of the glory revealed. And Nicodemus. Did you notice Nicodemus? We could end it here, but I wish to go back to the point with which we began, just to make sure we stay on that topic. So, once more about the ambush at dusk, the ambush of this image. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water came out. And the Gospel of John has built up those images as images of gift and healing. And even though this is an ancient illustration, long ago, theologically it's quite good. Theologically it's quite good. The blood and the water here, that is precious and will be gathered up, and are images of something infinitely positive, infinitely generous. That's where we will end.